So, you're new to Deadlock, you open the game, you get in, you open your menu, you click swap hero, and you see a roster of 38 heroes staring you down, and you are completely lost as to who to even begin to start as. Well, that's what this video is for. Hey, hi, how are you? My name's Phil. Welcome to Deadlock. Now, before we get too deep into this video, I want to say that all of these characters that I have listed will have a build that was put together by me that is a fairly straightforward, can typically buy left to right build, with a bunch of annotations that'll help you understand why you buy these items and why these items are good for these characters. If you've never done that and you just open it up and it just says beginner's build, you open up your build browser, you will have copied the link to the build ID, you will just put it in this search for box, and then you will hit enter, and then for example for Abrams here, the purple Abrams build that I have put together will pop up for you. And I did kind of spoil the first option. It's Abrams. Do you want to be a frontliner? Do you want to be tanky? Do you want to run in at the enemy team? Do you want to cause problems? Do you want to shove people out of position? Do you want to focus on mostly just managing your cooldowns and learning the movement of the game over trying to focus on every little bit of your aim? Well, Abrams might be the character for you. The character is fairly straightforward. Your first ability is just a little circle AoE around you that sucks the life from people. Very straightforward ability, but does a lot as the mid to late game comes around. Your second ability is shoulder charge. You shove people into walls so that you can start bullying them by either pulling them out of position or stunning them. Ability also gets stronger as you level it. Infernal Resilience is your third pick here. It is just a passive ability that heals you over time after you take damage, and also just gives you debuff resistant damage regenerated at the end of the game as well. Plus, we have Seismic Impact, the Abrams Ultimate, a pretty classic ability as far as the game's concerned. You jump up in the air and then you slam down on a target and stun him out. You're a very pick-focused character, meaning that you kind of go after one enemy on the team at a time, but you are very good at isolating them, dragging them out of position, and stunning them out, with really good potential in the mid to late game because of how big your AoEs can get. The build that I recommend and have made for people is a pretty purple build, the idea being that you try and get the most out of Siphon Life so that Siphon Life heals you a ton, so that when you're going in on people you can actually deal damage and hurt them. But it is also a very grab people and beat them up with Phantom Strike type build, a slow people and stun them around with Arctic Blast type build, and potentially punch people to death with Crushing Fists in the late game type build. Pretty straightforward stuff. Abrams is a very good frontliner. If you're a tank in, say, a Overwatch or Marvel's Rivals type game, you might want to play Abrams. If you've been a solo laner in like Smite, for example, Abrams is a pretty solid pick. If you want to be a carry, someone who does a lot of damage but is generally safe, someone who has an impactful teamfight ultimate but also can just sit back and shoot people, not quite a mid laner or AD carry from other games, but not quite a jungler either, someone who is just very iconic in this type of game, typically your DPS from your hero shooter style games, might I recommend Infernus. Infernus is a very strong M1 carry, not because of the strength of their gun itself. Their gun is a fairly normal gun, you just kind of shoot bullets and they hit people. Their strength comes from the ability Afterburn, which is when you shoot someone and hit them, you stack up a burning damage over time on them, which is based around the spirit damage that your character can deal, which means that you're not really a gun carry the way that other characters might be. You are a hybrid spirit carry, meaning that you like having good gun items and good spirit items. Another reason I recommend this character is their other abilities are pretty straightforward. You have Napalm, which is just a throwable debuff that as the game goes on gets better and better. You have Flame Dash, which is a very powerful escape and initiation tool that gets charges as the game goes on, so you can cast it back to back to back several times in a row at max rank. And also, they have possibly one of the best teamfighting ultimates at max rank, a gigantic AoE that after a short charge stuns people out and heals you for some of the damage dealt. They're a very good character and a very new player friendly character because they only have a little bit to think about, and that's mostly when do I apply my debuff, when do I ult, and when am I dashing in or out of the fight. The Infernus build I have linked for you is a very straightforward build for the most part. It is a very purple build, meaning that we care a lot about how much damage Afterburn and Flame Dash do with this build, but as you can see, the entire build filled out, minus selling off the cheap items that you buy to survive early game, has 2 slots open at the end of it, meaning that you can fill it out with any of these items down here, either finish out your survivability with some extra green, your gun damage with some extra orange, or maybe even more purple so that you do even more spirit damage to the enemy team. Overall, Infernus is a kind of flexible character that can pivot between spirit frontline-y builds and mouse 1 shoot them backline builds, but they're just a very straightforward character, and a lot of what they do makes a lot of sense the second you hop in the game. Now, does that type of spirit carry not appeal to you? Would you prefer to be more of a mage, maybe summon some stuff to help you out, to throw things at the enemy team, to cause problems for them? Then might I recommend Graves. Graves is a pretty unique character in this game for lots of ways. First, the fact that they literally summon their own minions with some of their abilities, and second, because they don't have a traditional gun, it is a weapon that locks on as you aim in the general vicinity of the enemy. So if you want to not worry about your aim as much, Graves is a pretty solid choice. The character is generally not that complex, though. We have Jar of the Dead, which is just a thing you throw that summons a bunch of skulls that hit the enemy team. You also have Grasping Hand, which is just a giant line that grabs people and holds them still and summons yourself a little ghoul to do damage. Your Essence Theft is a passive that just kind of does stuff for you by sucking away power from the enemy team. And your ultimate ability is also fairly straightforward. You summon a giant gravestone that summons a bunch of ghouls that run at the enemy team and run down lanes in order to just kill whatever they see. They're a very cool character and very archetypical summoner in that they summon tons of minions to do their bidding, but they are a very straightforward character in how they operate. Funny enough, the Graves build here builds similar to Infernus in that they have a bit of a mishmash of items, but that's just because of the way that the character scales. They do really well with buying items from all parts of the shop. That doesn't mean that we are a very gun-focused character, but we do use certain gun items very, very well because of how the gun items are set up. For example, because our gun does not miss people, we can almost always get the free bonus spirit damage off of Mystic Shot, and it is not very difficult for us to proc the passive bleeding ability of Toxic Bullets. One minor mention to make this build make more sense if you truly are super new to the game, the item Echo Shard's whole point is to make it so that you can summon your Jar of the Dead twice in a row. So you hit Jar of the Dead, Echo Shard, Jar of the Dead. And then we use the other active item, Heroic Aura, to make all of our dead heads attack even faster. It's the most complicated part of the build, and even that is not that crazy. It's quite literally Jar of the Dead, Echo Shard, Jar of the Dead, Heroic Aura, hold left click so that everything attacks what you want it to attack. It is much more straightforward than it sounds, and it's just a little bit of muscle memory for you to get used to it. So we've talked through frontliners, we've talked through kind of magey characters who utilize this game's spirit power system very well. What if you want to be more of an assassin? Or potentially more of a AD carry style character? Someone who gets ahead early and just carries that lead to the end of the game by just running at the enemy team, killing them off cooldown, and just generally causing problems. What I recommend? Drifter. Drifter is a very gun-heavy hero in that they like using a bunch of gun items to make it so that their left clicks are very powerful, the M1 aspect of the hero, if you would. But that does not mean that that is all that there is to this character. They are actually quite interesting overall. The thing that makes them a good run it down, kill the enemy team hero, though, is Blood Scent. It is an ability that buffs you when enemy heroes are isolated. In other words, no one is within 20 meters of them. But every time you kill someone who was isolated, you get 3% permanent weapon damage that stacks infinitely. As long as you keep getting kills, you can keep getting this permanent weapon damage. It is a lot of weapon damage over the course of the game if you can get some good isolated kills. But if you force it and you die a bunch trying to get those isolated kills, you'll never get your stacks. So make sure that you're not just dying trying to get these stacks. The character also has a pretty straightforward kit outside of that, though. We have a giant AoE cone ability on Rend. If you are in close range to someone, you do both spirit and melee damage to them, which is pretty interesting, and it means that you can apply certain melee items to people, but overall it's just kind of a bonus to how much damage you deal to people more than anything else. The big thing about Rend is that at max rank, you silence people if they're in that close range cone to you, meaning that they cannot activate their abilities of any variety, making you quite scary. Second ability, Stalker's Mark, is a skill shot projectile that you throw at people and stick to them. It bleeds and debuffs them, but most importantly, if you reactivate it, you teleport directly behind them. Anyway, I think that's a joke, but as you can see, you teleport right behind them so that you can get the most out of an ability like Rend, which is when you're in close range, you silence them. The kit is incredibly self-synergistic through things like that, and speaking of synergy, we have the ultimate Eternal Night. You cast out a giant AoE around you that hits 2 people by default and 3 people at max rank, and it limits their vision to a 15-meter circle around them, a very small little bubble that they can see, making it so that they are also isolated, so that it works towards Blood Scent if you kill them while they're targeted by your ult, but it also just causes a lot of disruption. If you can't see what's happening in the game, you're going to have a lot harder of a time in a third-person shooter. Drifter's build is a bit more like Abrams in terms of straightforwardness. It's mostly just here's a bunch of good items that you buy in a row, and here's a bunch of items that you can buy if you understand a bit more about build crafting and about what items you need to not die. But like all the other builds, it's all heavily annotated so that you can see what all the items do. I try my best to give character examples of who on the other team makes you want to buy these items. But the gist is that early game, you just want to live through the early game, get your core items of Kinetic Dash and Trophy Collector online so that you can run people down and get kills, and Trophy Collector gives you bonus souls per stack you have on the item. You get a stack from killing someone full stop, meaning that you can just get free money, which is pretty cool. A lot of people aren't a fan of the item at the moment. I think it's actually quite good on Drifter right now if you can use it well. And then after that, you just get a bunch of orange items and like a green item so that you're a little tanky and can run around the map fast and just absolutely obliterate people by hitting them with really strong rends and then shooting them to death afterwards. In the late game, we get some classic power spike items that either are really good at shredding people, really good at making our ult last longer, or good at just surviving and causing problems for the enemy team. Drifter can be a very scary carry if they are allowed to get ahead, but even if they are behind, their ultimate is a really, really good teamfight disruption tool that will help your team win team fights, because locking half the enemy team out of being able to see is quite strong. Alright, but Felt, you might say, what if I don't like being that damage dealer? What if I don't like being the frontliner? What if I just want to be a supporty character, or sit in the back and cause problems, or just kind of not be up close and personal with the enemy team? Well, I have my personal favorite support to recommend to you, Paige. Now, Paige doesn't play similar to a lot of supports from other games, but they are very much a support because of how their kit works. First and foremost, they have plot armor, which is just a shield. The shield is very strong as the game goes on because it scales very heavily with your spirit power. But the most important thing is that when you give it to someone, they get 25% weapon damage and 14% fire rate after you upgraded it once. And at max rank, it bounces between 3 total allies, meaning that you can shield up 3 people at once by casting 1 ability, making you just really good at spreading the love throughout your team and buffing your team to have really good fire rate and weapon damage, and just generally making your team harder to kill as well. In terms of other supporting abilities, we have Captivating Read here, which is an AoE that immobilizes someone for a second if they're inside of the radius when it goes out. It is a little slow of an ability, so we really like to put some ability range onto it so it's a bit easier to hit, but it is an incredibly strong part of the kit. Your ultimate is a giant AoE that stuns enemies and heals your allies. I had to spawn a couple bots here so you can see what I'm talking about. Throw out a giant wave of horses that heals your allies, stuns the enemy team, and just does damage. It's a very powerful ability in team fights and is a very strong part of the kit. It has a very long cooldown to compensate for it, so make sure you're using it smart. It does have a really, really long range on it, meaning you can actually throw this almost all the way across the entire map if you're really good at aiming it. If you want to do a little bit more damage as Paige, though, we have Bookworm, an ability that seems a little odd overall, but you throw out a book, and a dragon breathes fire and leaves a damaging field behind. It doesn't do a massive amount of damage, but it does apply lots of on-hit effects, which does play into our build that we'll talk about right now. Because Paige is generally a supporty character, I made a generally supporty build for them, but something to know when you're playing this is that this is a build that utilizes active items very well, so make sure that you are paying attention to your active items and not just letting them sit here and rot and not using them. I know that this is a problem that I had a lot when I was first learning supports in this game, was that you do have to use your active items well, and you have to use them often and early. But once you get used to that very, very different aspect of I have my normal abilities and then I have my active item abilities, they're a very easy character to get used to. You're really just trying to hit people with stuns with knockdown, to immobilize them with Captivating Read. You're throwing out barriers with plot armor and divine barrier, guardian ward. And then sometimes you use Alkfire to nerf their bullet res and let your mouse 1 carries just go to town. We also have lots of different options for other active items as the build goes on, and lots of ways to make yourself survivable as the game goes on. Overall, they're a pretty flexible character, but you are very much a support in terms of how you want to be thinking about them. Some honorable mention characters that I feel like are still pretty good for new people, but I don't recommend them personally because of various issues I have with the characters, include people like Venator. Venator is a pretty straightforward mouse 1 carry, but they usually have to toe the line between being a hybrid frontliner and a true mouse 1 carry. Plus, Gutshot is a very unique ability that has a lot of learning curve to it, because you can use it to get away or stun people into walls or just shove them away from you. And it's a bit more in-depth of an ability than I usually want to have on my plate when I am learning a new game entirely. Haze also falls into the honorable mention category because they are a assassin divey character, pretty similar to Drifter, but they have a different learning curve and a different set of skills. They're also a character that is currently want for identity a bit, because part of their strength is that you stack up fixation so that you do a bunch of extra weapon damage on someone after you keep shooting them, but your ultimate kind of implies you want to be a stealthy assassin who just runs around and drops ult on people, but you don't stack fixation until you start shooting them, but you want to be stealthy so that you can hit them with ult without them seeing, and it's a little bit of a dichotomy, and more often than not, you can end up just running around the map invisible, never find someone to go on, and just often waste your game away on Haze. And as a result, I typically don't think they are as new player friendly as other people think. One last honorable mention that I think is pretty new player friendly, but there is just a tiny bit too much of a learning curve to them, is Bebop. I know that sounds a little weird. If you've played against Bebop, the character is very one note in how they play, but I feel like positioning is something that separates the bad Bebop players from the good Bebop players, and having to focus on learning this whole new game, learning these whole new characters, and still being good at positioning in an entirely different way might be a lot for a new person to learn. They're a simple character. You stick a bomb on people, you pull people out of position, you knock them away with exploding uppercut, but then you can grab them back again with a grapple arm. Your ultimate is very straightforward, it's just giant AoE laser beam, but they are not the tankiest, and they typically have to be on the front line still. So learning how to pick your battles on a character like this makes me feel like they're not the best new player friendly character, despite the fact that a lot of the rest of their kit does lend itself to new playerness. Now that's that. That's 5 characters that I recommend for new players, with a handful of honorable mentions included. Feel free to completely ignore any and all advice in this video though. When I first started playing this game, I started by playing Paradox, a character that is not very new player friendly because of how much skill shots are in their kit, and also not new player friendly because of how many weird little notes you have to know about how abilities work. My next character after that was Mina, a character that's not new player friendly because they're not very survivable. And after that, it was Pocket, a character that has a lot of depth to their kit and abilities and is very squishy and has to be played in pretty certain ways in order to be played well. I've had a great time with the game, even playing characters that aren't super new player friendly, but that doesn't mean that that would be the same for everyone else. So I wanted to make this video to be like, hey, you're new, here are some options that might suit you based on what you've played in other games, and here's how these characters kind of work, and here's some basic builds, so that you don't have to go digging through build browsers and panicking and trying to figure out how stuff works, when this game has a bit of a barrier to entry already, because of so many reasons, between the having to get invites and just because it's a MOBA that has its own unique movement system. But that'll do it for me. Thanks for watching. If you've made it this far, please like, comment, and subscribe. It means a lot to me, and it means a lot to the channel, and it makes it so that I can make more videos like this in the future. But thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope to catch you all in the next one.